Hi, hello, welcome back, bienvenue, and all that jazz. It's time to talk about some books. It has been a minute since I filmed a video for this channel, just between the holidays and all of that kind of stuff. It just kind of slipped away from me. So this is going to be the first of my catch-up wrap-ups. So I'm going to talk today about the 11 books that I read in the month of November in 2023. As usual, I'll go briefly over the statistics of the month, and then I will go in ascending star order from my least favorite to most favorite book of the month. Starting off with the statistics. In November, I read 11 books, totaling 6,204 pages. And I've recently been getting a lot more into, I say recently, but it's been basically the year of 2023. I was a lot more into immersion reading, and so I had 71 and a half hours of audiobook time, and my average star rating for the month was 4 stars. So that was overall a solid month. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into the books. So before I get into the star order books, I have one book that I read that I did not rate, and that's just because I don't rate nonfiction or memoirs or things like that. I feel like for me personally, I just feel weird. There's like something off about me trying to give like a star rating of my reading experience enjoyment about somebody telling me their life story. Like, I don't know, it doesn't work in my brain. So the memoir that I read in November was The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. This is her memoir. I'm sure if you exist in any kind of bookish space, you are aware that this memoir came out last year. Britney Spears is an artist that I listened to a lot growing up, and it's one of the artists that my husband and Alex and I bonded over back in the day. It's, I think, the first birthday of his that we were together. I got him tickets to go see the circus tour, and so just like Britney Spears has a special place in my heart. And so it was just really fascinating and sad to read about what fame and her family kind of put her through and just like where she's at. I think if you're looking for the spilling of the most piping hot tea on her relationships with like Justin Timberlake and her parents and stuff like that, I don't think she goes in like a lot of people were hoping for, but I still found it overall like a really enjoyable experience to just kind of see the person behind the celebrity, if you know what I mean. But with that being said, we'll jump straight into the books. So my lowest rated book for the month of November was 3.5 stars, and this was Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. So Fourth Wing was like a phenomenon last year in 2023. It kind of came out of left field, and all of a sudden, everybody everywhere, their mom, their grandma, their resurrected dog from third grade, like everybody was talking about and loving Fourth Wing. And so me, being the person that I am, was just curious, like, what is it about this book? So I read it, and I didn't hate it. Like, the dragons, I love a telepathic animal bond with a snarky animal companion. So the conversations with Tarn and Darna and just like different dragons, I thought was fun. It is a like bombastic, edge of your seat type of plot. However, the problem is that for me, there were so many glaring things that didn't make sense that like took me out of just being in the popcorn read. So I think for the people that it worked for as just a popcorn read, they just ate that stuff up. And on top of that, I hated the relationship dynamic between Violet and, is it Xaden? Hated it with a fiery passion. I understand when relationships start in a place of lust or physicality or whatever. Sure, fine, it's great. But I want to see it progress, and I want to see the cute moments or some kind of conversations or something, and they would have a couple of those. But Katya's like attacking her toy right behind me. They had a couple of those, but it was always centered around when they were banging. And so, I don't know, it's just like, it's fine if you're just in lust, but then you're trying to sell this to me as like this ride or die, I will love you to the ends of the world, burn the world down kind of passionate love. But I'm like, where? I don't see compatibility. I don't see like true like emotional chemistry. I just see physical lust, which is fine. but I don't understand, and I think it's a problem that I have with the romance genre at large, is that I wish that there was a better way of setting expectations about romance, which in my mind is like the actual relationship building and the love, and sure, there can be physical stuff associated, like speckled in there, and the like just pound town style like thing, because that's not romance in my mind. But like, we all have our pedantic things and our like what we do and do not consider romance, so whatever. Like, if Fourth Wing worked for you, love that for you. It was fine. Like, so anyways, moving along, we then go to my 3.75 star reads, of which there are 2. First I will talk about is Midnight Tides by Steven Erikson. This is book 5 in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. And this one was just a weird mix for me. On one hand, we were introduced to a new cast of characters in a new part of the world, so we were learning like the dynamics between this like fishing tribe and this more established populace, and there was the conflict between the two, and it was all, since we're kind of in this like fishing area, centered around these kind of like water and ocean deities. And so just like the machinations, all of that, I thought was really cool, really interesting. My favorite parts of Malazan are always the gods among us and like the just bombastic magic just everywhere, just explosive awesomeness. So that was really cool. But then we had this one character, and I'm gonna go into a little bit of detail, so please click off if you, I will put a timestamp like always. It may be a tiny bit spoilery for book 5, but not really. It's like a side character, and it will also be inappropriate, so just be aware. So there's this one character, Shirk, and this other character, Ublala, and I shit you not, his name is Ublala. So Shirk is this thief who, in this corner of the world, something happens, so sometimes people don't cross through Hood's Gate, the God of Death's Gate, properly. And so they are basically like zombies, but with their mental faculties intact. And so that is Shirk. One of our characters wants to hire her because he wants her to steal something for him. And so when they're having this conversation, they're trying to decide what kind of charge is she gonna have? Like, does she want money? What does she want? She's like, well, I don't care about money. I wanna be able to not look like a corpse, because homegirl has like mold in her lungs. She looks gray, unhealthy, and she can no longer feel a lot of her body. And so she's like, I wanna be able to have intercourse that I can feel again. And so somehow in this world, there is basically a symbiotic parasitic anemone that can embed itself in membranous flesh, and when it does so, it can transmit physical sensations into the membranous flesh around it. And it also needs to feed, and since it's this kind of symbiosis, something about that feeding also helps kind of re-enliven things around it. And so she gets this weird anemone in her hoo-ha, and when this happens, she becomes like a sex fiend, like unsatiable, just banging all the time, because she can now feel it with her anemone hoo-ha that is also somehow making her look more alive. And in this scene, we also had to like vacuum out her mold in her lungs and replace it with like cinnamon and things that smell nice. So she is a literal corpse with a anemone in the hoo-ha that is making her basically like this succubus thing, and she just can't be satisfied by anybody. And then there's this separate character, Ublala, who, I shit you not, I think it's supposed to be funny, but it's the kind of like locker roomy kind of humor that I just kind of roll my eyes at and I don't connect with. But his thing is that all of these women just want to use him like a sex toy, because his schlong is so big that they don't want a regular diet of it. So he feels like people just use him and nobody will ever love him because he's just so well endowed. And so, of course, it starts ending up that his big old member is the only thing that can satisfy Shirk. And just like that whole thing was just so asinine and weird and ridiculous. And it was like such an awkward juxtaposition to the like imperial conquest / war of these peoples, that it just no. Like I hated it. I hated it. Like that whole thing, I was like, the fuck is this? And then with Malazan always being so heralded as this like amazing, mind-blowing. He doesn't hold your hand. It's just so complex. I'm like, okay, but we have like anemone vagina resuscitated zombie and man whose schlong is so big that he is used as a sex toy. But look, sure, whatever. And if you think it's funny and you connected with that sequence, like, love that for you. But just like, it took me so far out of the story. I was like, what is this? And I was 100% screen grabbing pages, sending it to my friends like Ellen, Jashana, and being like, what is this? So yeah, that one was interesting. Lots of conflicting feelings. And similarly with the next book, my other 3.75 star read of the month was Ship of Destiny by Robin Hobb. Also very conflicted feelings. So this is book 3 in the Live Ship Traders trilogy, which is the second overall series in the wider realm of the Elderlings. So this is a conclusion to a series. And so I don't want to go into too much detail because it would be obviously very spoilery, but there is one particular choice at the end of this book that like tanked my enjoyment. The first like half, I was so in it. We were getting so many cool reveals about the lore and the serpents and just all of it. I was like in it. I was like, is this gonna be my first 5-star read with Robin Hobb? And then we made a choice, and my interpretation of the choice like ruined this book. Like, I hated it with a friggin' passion because I felt like the way that a certain thing was handled was so cliche and stereotypical of what people talk about with gay men. So one of the major themes in the Live Ship Traders trilogy is this thought of generational trauma, or that kind of old adage that hurt people. And so we have one male character who was assaulted when they were a child, who is now talking about how like it's inevitable that he will then assault others. And then he has these weird pedophile leanings, and just like, I could not stand that we had like basically what seemed like a queer character, I'm not sure if he was bi, gay, whatever, who was being perpetuated as a villainous pedophile. And like, that rubbed me so the wrong way, and I hated it. And then there were some other choices with how trauma was handled at the very end that just did not do it for me and really tanked my enjoyment. And it was really unfortunate because I was loving so much of this book, and then all of that. And I am so happy for people who connected with the messaging or whatever, but just with the state of our world and me existing in it as a gay man, that kind of messaging I come across every day. And like, I really didn't expect or want to see it in this kind of stereotypical way in my fantasy books. It just... But we will move on. So the next book that I read, we're now into my 4-star reads, of which I had 5. So the first 4-star read I will talk about is The Shadow Cabinet by Juno Dawson. This is book, I want to say 2. This is book 2 in the Her Majesty's Royal Coven series. And it definitely had kind of a shift in tone, and the mysteries that we were solving I didn't think were quite as compelling as what we had in Her Majesty's Royal Coven. But if you are somebody who really likes that kind of fun CW feeling, like Charmed or Buffy style story, I think that you could have a lot of fun with the Her Majesty's Royal Coven series. There's also lots of queerness and just interesting things there. I will say, if you're somebody who really doesn't like witch hunting as like a concept, there is a considerable amount of kind of like the witches are kind of cloistered in their situation, and there is a group of men who are trying to hunt them down, a la old school witch hunts. But I thought it was very fun, very fast paced. The magic is pretty cool. I think it would make an amazing like show, like a pulpy show, and I would highly recommend it. I think it's a lot of fun. Then my next 4-star read is Morning Star. This is book 3 and the conclusion to the original Red Rising trilogy. And I, on one hand, understand that people get sucked into these really fast-paced, action-packed stories. But for me, for whatever reason, this Red Rising trilogy has literally felt like I'm reading like an abridged version of a bigger story, where it feels like the majority of the character relationship development, and especially the training of our main character Darrow, happens off page. And then I don't find that we have many peaks and valleys to get me kind of invested or lull me into a sense of security and then sucker punch me with something really dramatic. Like, I don't feel like that. I feel like Red Rising is just melodrama the whole way through, kind of like an old school, kind of cheesy soap opera, which just makes it so that the impact of certain scenes is not as impactful as I think it was intended to be. Like, the starting of this book, it was like, wait, what? Like, when did that happen? And then there was a major character death in the second part that I was like, no. And then part 3, I couldn't care less. It was like big ship battles, like whatever. And then part 4 was really kind of exciting. And so that's why I did end up at 4 stars overall, because it was like a fun read. With everybody talking about it as like one of their favorite series of all time, you go in kind of with those expectations of it kind of blowing your socks off. And unfortunately for me, it was kind of a miss on that front. Similarly, there was another series that I've been continuing with, and that was The Faithful and the Fallen Quartet by John Gwynne. I read book 3 in the month of November, and that is Ruin. And the ending of Ruin was really good. He started getting me in my feels a little bit, but this series so far has just been so classic fantasy feeling. But what I love about a lot of classic fantasy is the Dungeons and Dragons kind of inspirations with the magic and just the coolness. And there is very low magic. This is very like Game of Thrones or First Law levels of no magic. And it's a lot more about this character kind of growing into his own, being pushed into this situation of being this kind of figurehead for being this prophesied hero and what that means for him and his family and what he goes through. So there's a lot more of like that kind of thing. And I wanted it to be a little bit more explosive. That being said, the end did get me, and I immediately picked up book 4, and I've since read book 4, but I will talk about that in my December wrap-up coming shortly. But the series has been really good. It's been like a solid series. It's just not leaping or catapulting itself into my favorites of all time. Then the next thing I read for the Great Cosmere Long, we read the final non-Stormlight book, and that was the Arcanum Unbounded, which is the collection of novellas and short stories up to a certain point in the Cosmere. And we actually just had our live show for that today, so that live show is already live. I'll post the Great Cosmere Long playlist in the comments down below if you want to see our discussion on Arcanum Unbounded. It has some fun stories, particularly through a lens of somebody who's more experienced in the Cosmere, kind of pulling out little tidbits. It was fun to read about the Forests of Hell short story, which is really directly related to events in The Sunlit Man, which was Secret Project number 4. It was also fun to read The Sixth of the Dusk with the weird chickens / parrots / whatever. And The Emperor's Soul is a cool thought experiment. So I think it's a solid collection, but definitely not among my favorites of what Brandon Sanderson has written. And then my final 4-star read that I will talk about is The Queen of Sorrow, which is the third and final book in the Queens of Renthia trilogy. This trilogy is, on one hand, so much fun, but book 3 was really kind of a little bit of a disappointment. And what happened for me, and from what I've heard from other people, because I also talked about this book with Elle and Joshana and Angela and Jesse, and everybody seems to feel like we introduced a lot of really cool concepts at the very end, but it feels like we needed a 4th book to kind of fully flesh those out, because it felt like there was 2 major parts in this book, and it's only like 350 or 400 pages. Like, it's really quite short. And so I wish that that first chunk had been its own full book, and then the second chunk had been its own full book, just to get some more time, because everything we got so much information so rapidly, so you're kind of reeling from the new information and at the same time resolving the whole series. And it just kind of left me kind of like, well, that's an end, I suppose, which is always kind of like the worst feeling at the end of a trilogy. But I still would highly recommend this series. It is very fun. It is very fast, both in terms of like the time that it takes to read as well as the pacing of the book. It also just has some of the most cool atmospheric world building with these awesome spirits and some political machinations. And so I think, especially if you're somebody who's looking to get back into or get into for the first time into more adult fantasy, I think this is a great kind of transition from young adult into more complex, like long, really like convoluted adult series. And then my last 2 books are my 4.5-star reads. I didn't have any 5-star reads this month. The first one I will talk about is Her Majesty's Royal Coven. So that is book 1 in the HMRC. I think it's only supposed to be a trilogy. And again, like I said, for the Shadow Cabinet, if you're looking for that kind of urban fantasy, pulpy, Buffy-esque, Shadowhunters-esque, but more adult, less piney type of series, then I think it's so much fun. And I can't recommend it highly enough. And that will take me into my favorite book of the month. And that would be Slay by Laurell K. Hamilton. This is book 30 in the Anita Blake Vampire Hunters series. And I loved it. I thought that the movement and the character arcs and Anita's dynamics with her family and the resolution of the mystery plot that was set up in book 29, I thought it was all just so fun. And I always just love, it feels like going back home because I've been reading the Anita Blake series since I was in junior high. So that's what, 2002-ish. So I've been reading this series for more than 20 years. And I love when I get to go have a mystery adventure with Anita and crew. And I just really like the way that she does urban fantasy and magic. I think the way that the vampire powers work and their bloodlines and the way that the different magic systems, because Anita is also a necromancer, and so she has things around how she raises the dead and how that interferes with some vampire magic. And then we have all the different shape-shifting. We have where jaguars, where hyenas, where bears, where everything, and there's just so much there. And then the mystery elements. I eat up Anita Blake, and obviously I can't say very much because book 30 of an ongoing series, but it's just one of those favorites that will stick with me, and I'll just be so excited to keep reading for as long as she keeps putting them out. But that concludes all the books that I read in November. If you want to leave a comment down below, please let me know your favorite book that you read in the month of November, or if you want to talk about any of these books. Especially if you want to talk about them in a spoiler-filled way, just remember to leave a bunch of spaces and say spoilers, and then I'm happy to talk about whatever, because I definitely have thoughts, feelings, opinions, clearly. And if you just want to leave an emoji, maybe leave a vampire for Anita Blake, because she wins this month, but that will do it for all of the books that I read in November. So hopefully within the next week or so, I can film, edit, and upload the books I read in December, and then I'm planning to get my favorite reads of 2023 and my least favorite reads of 2023, and then I'm going to try to get back on schedule with TBRs and wrap-ups and that kind of thing moving forward. But that is all the info, the deets, and everything about the books that I've read recently, and that will do it for today's video. So please do all the things. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you feel so inclined, leave the emoji of the vampire. But that will do it for today's video. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!